Greetings, everyone. This is the Prolific, and I'm sitting here with my man Isaiah. And it's about to be Pisces season, and we're on the cusp. We got some things to discuss today. I'm pissed. I'm pissed about the UFL merger, XFL USFL merger. I don't like it. Also, we're gonna get into intangibles. Intangibles, my own zodiac brand. I'm gonna explain it to you that you have a sign for each planet. And also, I'd like to get a shout out to my son's store opening next month in Passyunk, Pennsylvania. It's Flight 96 Sneaker Store. I'm very proud of him. Both my sons will be running it, and it'll be open next month. So, do you know about the USFL XFL merger?
I know nothing about that, brother. How
You
about
know,
you?
you know nothing about it.
Enlighten me.
Well, look. First of all, football season is over.
Hmm.
I'm glad. You know, NFL is the big monster, but spring football has always been around. And when I was younger, back in the high school days, the first USFL came out, and I felt vindicated by it because Philadelphia had a team, and the Eagles had lost the Super Bowl to the Raiders previous to that. So when Philadelphia had a team in the USFL, they went three times to the championship. And a couple of Eagle players played on that team. John Bunning, Scott Fiskey, and Carl Peterson, who was the Eagles general manager, became the Stars general manager. And it really made me feel validated as a Philadelphia fan because I was humiliated when the Eagles lost to the Raiders in the Super Bowl because they had won earlier that season.
Hmm.
And before ESPN, before there was the debate shows, homeroom in high school, we did it first. We used to sit there and debate over all the shows and everything, all the teams. We were the first debate shows in high school, in homeroom, right? So when I stood my point and I swore the Eagles was going to win again, and they lost, and I had to come to school the next week. You know what I mean? I had to be greeted by all those, when the Eagles, you know what I mean? So, because I used to go toe to toe with a guy named Joe Hill. Joe Hill. It was me, Joe Hill, Fred Hill. They're not related because homerooms were organized alphabetically. So everybody in homeroom had the last name start with H. But we were the debate guys, and when the Eagles lost that Super Bowl, I was crushed. I was crushed. So when the Stars came around, they came around and they were called the USFL. And my naivety, I they sounded more official than the NFL. It was the United States Football League. It sounded more fit. I felt like the government control. It sounded like they wasn't going nowhere forever, because this is the United States Football League. This is our football league. This is bigger than the National Football League. That's how I felt. That's how the name, and it had the flag on the logo. The USFL, the stars and the stripes,
Right.
and they started out with 12 teams, and then right after that they expanded the next season to 18 teams, right? Because they got greedy, and they really wanted to you know what they really wanted to capitalize on what was happening. But the problem with the USFL, the original USFL, was they had poor owners. Like, they needed wealthy owners. Like, because these leagues that came out right now this spring, like the USFL, the new USFL, the XFL, and the Alliance Football League, all these leagues are single entities. I don't know if you know what single entity leagues are. They're owned by one owner. So there's 8 teams, but one person owns them. To me, that's not authentic competition. What creates the competition is franchise teams with different owners who have their own agenda and they have their own egos.
True.
So,
I
but
agree.
in the original USFL, they had franchise teams, but their owners weren't that wealthy, and that was the demise of the league. The second year, Trump came in, and he bought the Generals. And when he bought the Generals,
Mm.
what everybody doesn't know is this is what created higher salaries in the NFL, because he came out. He bought the Generals, and he wanted to pay Herschel Walker whatever he asked. And that spiked the competition because they were competing for players. You know what I mean? So these newer entity leagues in spring, they're not competing for players. They're picking up players who've been cut. You know what I mean? Players who just want to play. But the original USFL, they were competing for talent. And when you compete for talent, you raise the price of the contracts. So the original USFL, they signed 3 Heisman Trophy winners in a row. Now that had the NFL, like the NFL was livid because they were stealing all the talent. They didn't have roster depth, but they had surface talent. And surface talent is all you need to fill the seats. That's all you need. So they had Steve Young, they had Herschel Walker. They even stole some players. They stole Joe Cribbs, Brian Sipe. They stole some players from the NFL, and they even signed Lawrence Taylor and Chris Collinsworth, but the league didn't survive long enough for their contracts to go over because they got into a legal issue over monopoly, and they had a lawsuit and they had won it, but I don't even know who this guy was. I don't even know where Trump dug this lawyer up. He wasn't even a sports lawyer. You know what I mean? So he couldn't even call the case properly.
Let me ask you a question here. How was
This black
Reggie?
man is speaking.
How was Reggie White involved in there? What was his association with the league?
Okay, that's a good question because they resurrected the Memphis Showboats, and see, there's something different about the USFL.
When you say resurrected, you mean like brought back to the league?
Yeah, they brought the league. They brought this team back
Oh, okay.
because but the USFL, they drafted regionally. So whatever team, city you belong to,
Mm.
the players of those surrounding colleges went to that team because what they wanted to do was follow through with the fan support from those players from college.
Okay.
So Reggie
That makes
White
sense.
played at Tennessee, and so he got drafted by the Memphis Showboats, and he was like heralded like one of the greatest. He had a real great college football career, and when he came into the USFL, he continued to do as well. And the USFL didn't exactly have the respect of all the fans. They didn't feel like it was the same level talent as the USFL. I mean, as the NFL. But what happened is they realized that the talent was the same when the USFL um, stop existing, and those players went to the NFL, and they still continued their success.
Right.
So it's like at first the USFL was kind of looked at like it was a pro league. They were pros because they were being played. That's what makes you a pro. But when the players went into the NFL and they continued their success, Jim Kelly, Herschel Walker, Steve Young, Doug Williams. Doug Williams was somebody who was stole away from the NFL and played in USFL and went back to the NFL. But some players were original USFL players like Steve Young, Jim Kelly, Calvin Bryant, and so those guys continued their success when they went into the USFL. The USFL folded in '87 officially because they had a scheduled '86 season that did not happen after they lost the lawsuit. And what happened, and what many people don't know,
What was the lawsuit about?
the lawsuit was about monopoly. Like they felt like the NFL was blocking the contracts of the TV contracts for the USFL. So the Trump was like, "You guys have a monopoly on the sport. We can't do it like we want to do it." So yeah, so Trump was like, "What we're gonna do is we're gonna switch to fall. We're gonna switch to USFL to fall, and we're gonna go head to head." Because what he was trying to do, and I didn't really want to get on it about Trump, and I don't want to dwell on the past USFL so long. I want to concentrate, but I want people to understand the situation. There's plenty of videos out there on YouTube that talk about the original USFL. But he was trying to, what he confessed that he was trying to do was he was trying to force a merger with the NFL so he can get a team cheaper. Like so if the USFL franchises were cheaper than the NFL franchises. So he's like if he bought the Generals, which he already had, and then he merged it, he got accepted in the NFL, he got a team half price. He didn't want to buy the standard NFL team for the price it was going for that day. You know what I mean? So he was trying to sideways himself into the league. Jacksonville, Tennessee, and Arizona all got teams in the NFL, either new franchises or moved to those cities because the USFL proved that pro football could exist in those cities. Before the USFL, Jacksonville didn't have a team, and then Houston ended up moving to Tennessee because everywhere that the USFL thrived, the NFL put a plug in it. You know what I mean? They said, we're going to put our own team in there. So it's just like once they tested the market and proved that football could thrive in those cities, the NFL moved teams or created teams in those cities. So that's why we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. They didn't have a team in Charlotte, which is the Panthers today, but they still proved in that area over there in Memphis, Tennessee, and everything that football could thrive because Birmingham had a team in the USFL, but the NFL has yet to put a team in Birmingham. I heard Birmingham's pretty rough, but every alternative spring league has had a Birmingham team. There's been the Birmingham Fire for the World League of American Football. We had the Birmingham Thunderbolts for the original XFL. We have the Birmingham Stallions, who was resurrected for this new USFL. We had the Birmingham Barracudas, that was the CFL's team when they came into the United States with their experimental season. Birmingham always gets, yeah. Birmingham. We had the Birmingham Americans of the original World League in the '70s. Birmingham always has a spring football team, and they do pretty good. This version of the Stallions, their fan support isn't as strong as the original Stallions of the USFL. Now, I'm bitter over the Stallions, this new USFL Stallions, because they won back to back, and they also dethroned my Stars, their first championship, which is 2022, when the USFL came back. The Stallions and the Stars played in the first championship of the new league. The Stars used to own the Stallions in the original USFL. They faced each other a couple times in the original USFL in the playoffs. They were in the same division back then. Now they're in opposite divisions and can play each other in the championship. Now, which also has me upset that I was setting this all up to tell you why I'm upset about the merger, because the merger between the XFL, which has 8 teams,
Right.
and the USFL, which has 8 teams, they merged and they continued to only have 8 teams. So each league dropped 4 teams. And one of those teams in the USFL were the Stars. And the Stars we have a strong following. The difference between the XFL and the USFL, and the reason why they dropped the 4 teams, is because they both had different marketing strategies. The USFL, when they came back in 2022, they were playing in hubs. And hubs is teams were sharing stadiums. Teams were sharing stadiums, and because their strategy was to market the teams and make ratings, and then once the teams got stronger, they were going to put the teams in their cities. So, like the first season of the USFL, they only had 2 stadiums. The whole league was playing in Birmingham. The only home team were the Stallions, because they were saving. A lot of these leagues lose money with stadium fees. So the USFL was like, our strategy is, if we have all our teams play in a few stadiums, then we'll be saving money, because the attendance might be struggling, and if the attendance doesn't support the stadium, then the league's going to be struggling. So they were trying to save money. They were trying to save money, but for some reason they didn't stick to that plan. They had a 3-year plan. And they were financed for 3 years. This is the 3rd year. And the third year, they merged with the XFL and they rebranded themselves the USFL. So the hub system, the USFL was trying to save money because stadiums are expensive. And the XFL, the difference with the XFL is that all their teams had stadiums. I personally think the team should play in Major League Soccer stadiums because those stadiums are designed to be smaller. And when you have smaller stadiums, smaller seatings, lesser seatings, it looks full on screen. Like these NFL fields, these stadiums, they have like 60, 70,000 seats. But the Major League Soccer fields, they're like maybe 15, 20,000. So 15, 20,000 looks full on TV. Now, so the XFL came out in 2001 the first time. Okay, they only lasted a season. It was excellently done though. It was really good, but it started falling off. But they at least got to the championship. Okay, so then the XFL came back in 2020, and then we know COVID hit. They were doing massively great. They were supposed to come back the following year, but the Rock bought the league, and they needed time to like rebrand themselves. I don't think they should have rebranded themselves, but they came back 2023. They had the same teams. Some of the teams moved, but they also rebranded the teams that were already there. They shouldn't have done that. So now, each time these leagues come back, they have this big. They sell us this big dream that they're going to stick around. And then, both leagues said that. USFL said, "Oh, we're back. We're back for good." XFL said, "We're here to stay." Next thing you know, these two leagues are merging. Now, they were both here for the spring, but the XFL season began right away after the Super Bowl, and the USFL was more of like a summer league, and their championship ended in 4th of July. And I thought that was perfect for a league called the United States Football League. Now they merge, and their leagues weren't even identical. They had sort of different type of rules. Now under this new UFL merger, the fans have lost some teams. And football is a sport of tradition, and they keep on making all these shifts, creating new teams, dropping teams. You can't get any trust. Like the fans can't trust these leagues. Like you can't be a fan and say, "All right, I'm locked in." Next thing you know, your team's gone. You went to the merchandise store. You're rocking their gear and everything. Next thing you ain't got a team. It's just like the inconsistency is driving me nuts. So that's why I'm not crazy about this UFL because the new USFL was actually called the Spring League, and they were playing, and they just went and they bought the copyrights and trademarks of the USFL to latch on to that tradition. You know what I mean? To give the fans something familiar because nobody was watching the Spring League. Nobody knew those teams. Everybody knows the history of the USFL because of the rivalry with the NFL. And you can look it up even if you didn't know. So now they turn around after they just established themselves, and now they call themselves, they rebrand themselves the UFL. Now here's the thing. This is how they appease the fans. They have two conferences. They have the USFL conference and the XFL conference. That's supposed to appease us and make us happy that we still have our brand, but they're now in the umbrella of the UFL. So they start March 30th, and let's see what happens. I'm just watching to see what happens. I don't have too much faith in it. They've sold me the dream, and they keep taking it back. It's like Charlie Brown when he's going to kick the football. Every time, every time he believed that he was finally going to get that, Lucy would remove and that's what happens to us spring fans. So we'll see what happens. That concludes this segment.